Laura Claycomb here to give you a few tips about breathing in vocal technique. The first thing that we have to talk about is, of course, your body and how you're using it. I think most people in singing think that they have to use these muscles right here and close those up. And that is exactly the wrong thing to be doing in singing. What we want to do is elongate the exhalation process and to control that, because our diaphragm wants to come up. Our diaphragm, when we breathe in, it goes down, and that's stretching it. And then when it releases back to where it wants to go. So it wants to be here, breathing out. So we have to make a conscious decision. Well, our body makes this decision to breathe in, unconsciously, of course. And we can control that. We can't control our diaphragm per se. We can control the muscles around it. So saying we need to use our diaphragm to breathe is really not a useful concept, because we end up using these muscles, the rectus abdominalis, which should not be used in singing as much as we can. And so what we do want to do is figure out which muscles we can use, because I think that is the most frustrating thing to say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. But then you say, well, what do I do? So the main question is, which muscles are you going to use? I would advise you to feel your ribs, feel the sides of your ribs. In the Italian school of singing, there is this thing called the appoggio, which is a very interesting term, because appoggiare can mean I'm placing this on something. I'm just putting it there on top of something. I'm placing something on top of something. But it also implies a flux. It also implies that I'm just going to put it there for a second. Or if I'm going to sit down on something, mi appoggio qua. So you're only just perching yourself there. You're not sitting. So the idea of appoggio is to kind of perch yourself upon the intake of the breath. And so what we want to feel is that we're almost always on the intake of the breath, and that you're keeping those muscles out that you feel on the intake, and just letting the air go from a different spot and not controlling it with muscles so much as letting it go in a controlled way, which is, of course, much more subtle and not as easy as just grunting your way through something. But that's why we call it vocal technique, and why it takes a long time to learn, and why it's frustrating at the beginning, because you want to pull in your ribs immediately and your solar plexus goes, oh, I want to be involved. So let's get them uninvolved. First, let's do a little bit of an exercise. I also like to talk about anchoring things in your pelvic floor and feeling that that is where you're breathing from. If in some yoga teachings, they talk about a second diaphragm, which is basically your pelvic floor, and that you're breathing from there, and that you can close there. And I find that a very, very helpful concept to talk about in breathing for us as singers. Not that we have to close up anything, but that you feel a certain type of tension that is a good tension. We always have to have a good balance between tension and we don't want this and we don't want, so we want something in between at all points, and it's always a balancing trick. So, or not a trick, it's actually technique. So let's talk about a couple of breathing exercises. One which would be to feel that spot that I talk about in my article, that perineum spot, that pelvic floor spot, that you can actually feel yourself engage with, without engaging everything above it, without engaging these muscles here. So if you can breathe in to whatever count you want to do, I think 5 is probably easy. This is to feel the rib cage expand in the sides, especially in the back and in the front. That you want to feel that this is coming out. Not that your stomach's coming out, but that your rib cage is expanding. And be aware of those muscles, those external abdominal oblique muscles. And those are the muscles that we want to engage to keep your ribs open so that you're not closing down the minute that you start to sing. Your ribs will eventually close down, that I know that, but we want it to resist as far as it can and as long as it can, so that you're not just using all of this with which to sing. So let's talk about the exercise. The exercise is breathing in, feel your ribs. I think this is probably a better stance than this, because then you can get tension here. Feel your ribs come out. I want you to breathe in slowly to a count of 5, and then hold your breath for 5, and then release your breath for 5 counts. And those counts can be as slow or as fast as you want, or you can make it 10, or you can make it 3 if you don't, or whatever. But just that you can comfortably do all of these stages of the exercise. And when I say hold in the middle, I don't want you to hold. I want you to feel like you are still inhaling. And it's going to feel a little bit of a struggle that you really want to, but I want you to be aware of those muscles so that you become consciously aware of those muscles, and you can call upon those muscles when you're doing the exhalation. And you keep those as open as you can and feel like you're only just engaging a little bit underneath with your little spot. You're not grabbing it, you're just engaging, you're just aware of it. That's where you're lifting from. You want to feel that all of this is open. This might even come up as you are going. And this may come in a little bit, but I don't want it to grab, especially here. So let's try it. So breathe, let out all of your air. And then breathe in to 5. Sides of your ribs, backs of your ribs, front of the solar plexus, all open. Now hold. Feel like you're still finding pockets in there that you can fill and make bigger. And now make sure you're still engaged with your spot. That is the exercise that I find the most difficult to do. And it's the exhalation that you want to either hold it and you feel all of these muscles start to engage. That's why you need to pay attention to these muscles as you're inhaling so that you can reactivate those. Keep those open and feel like you're just coming up from underneath. I think maybe giving a or a as you go out to give yourself a little bit of back pressure so that you actually feel that air coming and you don't just let it all out is helpful. So let's try it again to the count of 5. And keep those ribs up. I think it's better to do a shorter number of counts to begin with so that you can keep your ribs out until the end and then move and keep doing 6, do 7, do 8. But don't train your body to close that up at the end, and don't let your body do these things. So in your exercise, you have to be very specific about what you're trying to accomplish and very specific about what little exercises you're doing in the first place. I think sometimes we just kind of do them and we get into what we normally do, which is pull in the ribs. So make sure you are concentrating on the exhalation of keeping your ribs out and feeling that buoyancy underneath. That's what the appoggio is about. I very much urge you to go read that article, which I gave a link. And there's also a thing called the breath gym, which is interesting. I think it can be interesting for people that are not aware of their muscles and just trying to get everything moving. Look it up on YouTube. It's called the breath gym. And that, however, I think you have to be very careful to not be using these muscles and to really make sure that you're engaging underneath and keeping this open. I also want to urge everyone to keep that engaged, your spot, as I call it. Keep your spot engaged when you're inhaling, because you can't just think that on the exhalation, oh, I gotta do that, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Your body will forget. So you need to be calm. Make sure you engage that when you're breathing in, when you're holding and keeping on inhaling, and when you're releasing, so that there's not a, oh, I have to kick in with my support now. Your support needs to be all the way through your voice, all the way through when you're singing, and it needs to become just a habit. So you have to make that a habit, and you have to keep at it. And it's frustrating, and I know that because I've been there. So my last idea of today is about the attacks on the onset. And I worked so much on this with my voice teacher, my very first voice teacher, Barbara Hill Moore. And we did not let me go on in pieces until I got the attack right. And I think this has really helped me to be able to pick a note out of the air, to be able to have a clean attack on things, and also to get a lot of air out of things. My second very historic teacher, besides Barbara, was Norma Newton. And Norma Newton always said, let's get the H out of that sound. Let's get the out of that sound. And it's the same concept. You engage with your support, of course, and support is always the bedrock of what you're going to do. And you work on attacks. So when I say attack, I don't mean that you're grabbing on the voice when you start a note. I mean that you are, it's the onset of the note, that you are closing the vocal cord and having a bit of what I call tonicity to the cord, and not something, the same thing as our support, because our support is giving the pressure, and this gives the back pressure. If this is squashed, then you're gonna really have to push here. If this is, then you're gonna not have to do so much here, because otherwise it'll be all floppy. So there needs to be a balance between the two, between the support and then the back pressure that it's getting from the closure of the cords. And in order to feel the closure of the cords, I have students feel like they are supporting, being aware of their support, and giving me a small glottal so that they feel the edges of their cords. Ah, ah, not ah, 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 not here. Ah, 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 ah. So that you just feel that your cords are closing. And then once you've done that a few times, ah, 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 and you feel that that is connected with your support, that you have a connection beneath in your spot, let's say, you will start that ah, ah, and then close your cords so that you just feel the edges of your cords together, so that you're aware of that. I think a lot of people are not aware, and they just kind of start a note. Ah, ah, ah. Ah. And my teacher, Barbara Moore, would work with me. We would go over and over and over and over the beginnings of notes. No, that was grabbed. No, that was airy. I had an H in there. So you have to feel that edge of the chord and be aware of it, and be aware of your support as you're going into it. So this ah, 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 close the chord, feel the edge, feel the support underneath, so that you're not busting open this chord, and you are not blowing air through that chord. You are with the air, you are releasing the, letting the vocal cords vibrate. So that's about all I can give you for today, but I hope it is helpful, and look forward to my next section, which will come in a week's time. Shalom.